What a journey. And it's a journey. It's two journeys, a life journey, 60 years, how the world have changed. It's very similar to what happened to our history. I have to say, Dr. Anna, I feel very jealous of that trip. Good. Thank you so much. It's been very inspiring.
Well, you are invited to the premiere.
Oh, yes, I will. I will be there. And now we are going to pay tribute to our founder, Dr. Leibrecht. And we are very lucky as we have Haral, his son. And he worked at Schiller. He's an alumnus of Schiller. He's married to an alumnus of Schiller. And of course, he will share with us history and all those things that we imagined, but that he lived himself. And Sonya Holley is also an alumnus of us, faculty in Heidelberg and in Tampa. She was, I think you even worked with Dr. Leibrecht at the time. So they both are going to have a conversation and they will share with us their experiences, and we will learn a lot about the history of this great institution. So thank you so much for accompanying us. Please take the stage.
I would have happily given up on my interview just to go on and listen to your wonderful trip. And it is incredible. And just one note before we start, because during Brexit, I was still in the German parliament and part even of the government. And we talked a lot, we were discussing how can we get the Brits out of, the idea to leave the European Union. It was next to impossible. So we spent a lot of time discussing that. We spent at least as much time to discuss the hairstyle of your son. And now I'm here in Madrid, meeting the chap who is responsible. Well, but I think it's too late now to change it. Thank you for this wonderful speech. Thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for joining us today on this very special occasion. I'm Sonya Holley. I'm an alumni of Schiller International University, and also I am a faculty now teaching international business. I am honored to be here for our 60th anniversary with none other than Haral Leibrecht, the son of our esteemed founder, Dr. Walter Leibrecht. Welcome, Harold, and thank you so much for your generosity in coming to help us all remember your father and his legacy, which continues to inspire us all.
Thank you for receiving me here, and I must say I'm highly impressed. I have lost a little bit touch of Schiller for a couple of years because we had other things in mind, and I arrived here yesterday, and I'm so impressed of the wonderful staff, of the people here, of the alumni, and also of the vision of Dr. Anna. I mean, it's incredible what you do here. I'm very grateful, and it's a very special moment for me to be here. I met Marta on the NAFSA conference in New Orleans, just more or less by chance. She tried to get in contact with me, says, oh, you have to be here. And I said, and I was a little reluctant because I was supposed to be in Sweden today, but the world is small these days, so to travel from one place to the other. But then she grabbed me and said, Harold, you got to come. And I'm very happy to be here and be part of the 60th anniversary. And it is indeed a very special moment. And the moment I came through this door, I felt the Schiller spirit again, which I felt was a little bit lost after the school was first sold. I think we are back on track. You are back on track.
Better than ever.
Better than ever.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I actually met Dr. Leibrecht at Schiller the summer of 1999, one of the best moments of my life. That was the most amazing summer I've ever had. I was studying my BBA at the London campus, and I met Dr. Leibrecht at a school function, and somehow we hit it off. And he ended up hiring me to become the cultural activities coordinator for the London campus. Dr. Leibrecht was the first person of his stature to truly believe in me. I not only got my own office, but I was able to be on his team and hear his vision of the university firsthand and understand his cultural vision and really get to understand just how much he loved the university itself and all of the goals that we were going to accomplish. I truly believe the success of my international business career was definitely attributed in part to working under the leadership of Dr. Leibrecht. After graduating from the Madrid campus, my MBA, I left Schiller and moved to New York City. I became the first assistant to travel internationally for Tommy Hilfiger. That was my very first job. And then later I went on to be an international director for Ralph Lauren, traveling to over 27 countries in the world, places like Hong Kong, Turkey, Tunisia, doing product development and international business. And I think so much was being inspired by your father. So Harold, your father, Dr. Leibrecht, has left an indelible mark on international education. Can you start by telling us a little bit about his early life and what inspired him to establish Schiller International University?
Yes. First of all, I think he looks down today from heaven and sees us here, and I'm sure if he would have met Dr. Rana, they would have hit it off immediately. Sure. They're somehow the same spirit. So I think he would also be very happy to see us here today. I think he had a very happy childhood, but that childhood ended very fast. He was born in 1927, but then in the age of 15, he had to go to war. Second World War was raging through Europe and also already in the middle of Germany. So he was more or less robbed of his youth, I would say, and later on. And he had, but very German, everything still had to be organized, so there was a battle. So during the day, he was sitting on one of these cannons trying to shoot down some British planes. He said they never got him. It was hopeless, and often enough, they had no ammunition, and he was a young chap. He questioned the whole situation anyway. So he was wondering what was going on. And so his goal was to get out of depressed Germany as fast as possible. So he still, as I said, he was in the battlefield. He had to finish his high school degree. You know, you cannot study without a high school. So he was fighting during the day, going to school at night on the battlefield, and then after war was over, then he still had to do some tests and stuff. And the world was a bit crazy. But he says Germany is really not my future. Everything was depressed, and for young people there was nothing much to do. So he tried to get out of Germany. He started to study in Bavaria, first in Erfurt, later his doctorate degree also in Heidelberg. But he was he was very lucky to get a study abroad in Zurich, which was not far from Heidelberg. But through a lot of luck, I think he bribed someone with, he once told me the story, with 6 light bulbs. Those days, a few things were precious, like cigarettes, things like that, minor things, and light bulbs. We had electricity, but you couldn't, the houses were dark. And so he talked to one of the guys who was in charge of sending these students to Switzerland, and then he went to him and said, well, would it help if I would organize you 6 light bulbs? And the professor threw him out and said, I'm not bribable and all that. Well, to make a long story short, he was a week later. The professor came back and asked whether that offer would still be valid. And my father never told me where he organized those 6 light bulbs, but nevertheless, that was the start of his international career. And then he was one of the very, very first Fulbright students to study or continue his studies and a postdoctorate in the US. So he went to New York, studied there, went back to Germany, made his doctorate, finished doctorate, went back to New York at Columbia University. There he met my mother, who was a student in his class. Now, today, you shouldn't mingle with, as a professor, you shouldn't mingle with the students. They're age-wise not far apart. And my mother was from a tiny town near Schwäbisch Hall in southern Germany. She was the first girl of her village to go to high school, first girl to get a stipend to go to the United States, and she studied economics. But then the news spreads, oh, there's this very handsome young professor from Germany. He teaches very complicated philosophy and theology, and so she said she and all her friends, they would go to his class just because he's a pretty professor. And she said she never understood what he was teaching, but nevertheless it ended. Well, I'm one of the products, I guess. I'm the youngest of five, and then my father had an incredible career with Northwestern University, University of Chicago, Harvard, and normally you would never give up such a job, but then he was attracted by his own idea to bring American students over to Europe and learn more about the old world.
And I love that you're talking about Dr. Leibrecht's passion for education. You could definitely, meeting him, could see that he was so passionate about education, and that actually spawned me to really love education, because when I was in New York, I taught at 2 colleges myself, and I just always remembered his passion, which continued to inspire me in education till today, actually. Now, it's inspiring to hear about his motivations, Harold. What were some of the core values and principles that he instilled in the university from the beginning, you think?
Well, first of all, his idea was that everybody would also believe in him or herself. So it's not that someone from above would tell you what to do. I mean, he came from a very kind of centralized, extremely controlled Nazi Germany, and he was missing that freedom of education, of thought, of expression, and all that. And he saw that even when the Nazis were defeated, that these values were at stake. And he also believed that it's good if a young man or woman would get out of the comfort zone of the families, get out in the world, get bitten by the bug to travel, and then start a kind of a restless life, but a life full of new experiences, meeting interesting people. I think that was his intention from the very beginning. And the very first student, I mean, he had then the idea to start a college in Germany. Everybody thought he's crazy. Why would you give up your job as he was the youngest ever professor at Harvard. He was an incredible talented guy. He was also later in charge of he was the head of the Ecumenical Council of the World Churches, Council of World Churches. I mean, he brought together, the Jewish belief and the Muslims and the Christians and all that. That was in Chicago, but he says, no, I'm not the guy who can work well under others. He has to be independent, open-minded, and these crazy ideas. And then he came. He took the whole family. I remember I don't remember. I was only a year old, but what I heard, they bought a new station wagon, one of these oversized American cars. There they put in 5 kids, my mother, an aunt of mine, and all the luggage, and we came with Queen Elizabeth II with the ship over to Europe, to Cherbourg, and here we were. And then he looked for a building, and he finally found an old castle near Heidelberg. Because that was cheaper than a new building those days. And I just told the story over lunch. I got to know the bankers who helped him then to finance. And they said, it was a crazy story. Here comes this crazy professor, this German professor with his 5 kids to Germany and wants to buy a castle. And it was so, they assumed that it will never come through. But after the first meeting with the bank, he had the money. So that was his kind of spirit. He was a good salesman maybe as well, but he could also sell the idea, and which was appealing to the banks, but the German officials in education, they hated the ideas, because in German, as well in all the countries my father started a university, there was at the beginning largest opposition, because in Germany, for example, they always said education is the monopoly of the state and private has nothing to say. And so he was a true pioneer. He fought this all through with all the accreditations everywhere, in England, in Germany, later in the US, which was always an uphill battle, but by the end he succeeded.
That is wonderful. Now, I do have a note. You may have seen on the agenda, but right after this session, we'll be honoring Schiller, the poet, the philosopher and classical playwright that gives our institution its name. And now, what can you tell us about it? What do you think your father, or why do you think your father chose Schiller as an inspiring figure for the university?
Normally, it's the tradition to name a university either after the founder or the town it's founded. Maybe someone, a donor who gives a lot of money, but he thought that was not a good idea. And we live very close to Marbach, and Marbach, our home, is the birthplace of Schiller. Now, he didn't choose the Schiller name due to that, but Schiller is the I would say the second famous poet in Germany after Goethe, and he is, and we heard this earlier today, the figure in Germany, maybe in Europe, also for enlightenment. He questioned all his life whether someone born into a family is automatically to be the next king or duke. And his ideas, I mean, I think all his life he lived a little dangerous because, you know, the noble families wouldn't like the idea. But he later became an honorable citizen of Paris because he supported, he fought in the Paris Revolution. He also went to the United States, fought there with Lincoln, with other, I mean, he has these incredible ideas to change the world, and never accept what other people tell you, and question political systems. And I think that is the core idea, and bring people together and have all these values. So Schiller is, and we have still the Schiller archive is the writers' archive in Germany. So let's say every German president, that's one of the first visits, they come to the place near to us and to see Schiller's birthplace. And so he is a most famous figure in Germany. And I think it was a good reason to name the university after him.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Leibrecht's vision for a global education was quite ahead of its time. How did he go about implementing his vision in the early years of the university?
I think he had, in those days, he had a dream. You know, you remember other political figures and important people of the world, especially Dr. Martin Luther King. But I think he had his dream too, to have a peaceful world, to bring people together, let them talk, even enemies. I mean, it's incredible what he also in later stages did for the students. Whenever there was any crisis in the world, it's still today, when there's a crisis in the world, there is at least one or two Schiller students, from that part of the world. So I remember when the first Iraq-Iran war was in, and I was a student in London, in Waterloo then, and then he made sure to get these students together. If we first talked to the students, but then we had also discussions with the students. Or when in 1979 there was a revolution in Iran, we had a lot of students from Iran. Wow. He went to Tehran, and when he came back, he said, "Well, I was a little crazy. We were shooting in the streets and everywhere." But he went there because suddenly the students, they were stuck. They wouldn't get their money out of the country. I have a personal friend who's suddenly didn't hear of his father. He never heard of his father anymore because he was a civil servant, and so on. But he would personally take their problem as his. I remember when he went to Nigeria in Lagos. I mean, there was. He said it's great, because suddenly the students had there was political, there was civil war going on and so on. But he would go there, and that was his problem now. And often enough, he got things solved. And he always made sure if a student was stuck because of such a political situation, we would never ever, let a student go. Yep. We said now he ran out of money. Okay, there's no source anymore. But the other full-paying students, we have to drag them through. And I think this was something he also learned from his father, who was a headmaster in Heidelberg during the war times. And who is just mentioned in a new book on Heidelberg hidden, not champions, but heroes, because he helped, for example, Jewish girls who could not study or who were not allowed to go to German schools anymore. He just led them in the school and pushed them through to their exams, and later even made sure that they could study somewhere. So I think that it was always this idea: never leave people alone who have problems, because friends are proven in difficult times. As long as things go well, you have all the friends. In the moment things get rough, then you have the real friends. Yeah. So I think that was what was one of his motivations, I would say.
He was definitely a visionary, that is for sure. Can you share any personal anecdotes or memories of your father that can highlight his dedication to his vision?
Well, I even know a funny story. He once got a phone call from Prince René from Monaco. And he said, and he learned that there was a little college in Monaco owned by the royal family, and it didn't run well. So, and it was must have been in the early 70s or so. And there was Grace, the princess was already there, and so, but Monaco was not the fancy place it was today. So he went there, and he talked to Prince René, and then the two of them decided, a college in Monaco has not such a future. And he would take over the school, but he would transfer it to Paris. And later on, he said that was one of his greatest regrets in life. Not that he opened a campus in Paris. This he would have done probably anyway. But to not have a university in Monaco, that was only part of the story, because the two also hit it off so well. So after the deal, then René said, you should soon come back and have a tea and with my wife, and you should bring your wife along. And my father is a good Swabian. We come from the southern part of Germany. We don't part with money easily. So he said, just for a cup of tea, go to Monaco. No. And my mother, all the rest of her life, she said, oh no, why? She always wanted to go to Monaco and see the royal family. It never worked out, but nevertheless, it was the start of our Paris campus. That was one of the anecdotes. Now our home in Germany was filled with interesting guests. So guests from all over the world, from the academic world, but also a lot from the political world. I remember as kids, we were a little bit. Well, there was the sister of the Shah of Persia came, a princess. That was before the revolution in Iran, and she would come to our little town, and my 4 siblings and me, we were so disappointed that the princess wouldn't wear a crown. But that's also one of the little things which happen if you live in a family who is either very much involved in business or in international education. Maybe one story. Never give a politician a microphone. We'll never stop. There was this father. Her daughter studied in Heidelberg, and I will call him Mr. Important. Mr. Important said, and there was an issue, I can't even remember, it was even then a minor issue. But he said, no, I need to talk, to the owner of the school. And then he first talked to our director in Heidelberg, and I said, no, I must talk to Mr. Schiller. And then there were And our vice president, Dr. Hörnicke, talked to him. Not only Mr. Schiller. I said, okay, we have our president, Dr. Leibrecht, but he is not here. He's in Ingersheim. It's an hour's drive. No. Not I have to talk to Mr. Schiller. and then my father said, let him come. and then this poor father drove then from Heidelberg to Ingersheim to our home. And my father, he just we have a big bust of Schiller. He put it on his table. and then he opened the door, and the father came over. Here's Mr. Schiller. Unfortunately, he's already 300 years dead. and then the father recognized they both had then a very good laugh. So finally, and the problem was solved immediately. Perfect. So so the father felt, it's sometimes not the right approach to be the very Mr. Important. And
I love them. We all love them. Well, one of the best memories I have of your father was once a month at the London campus, we would have a cultural party. And every single student or every faculty, we'd get together. I think at the time in Schiller, we had 103 different countries represented at the time. So we would have the hams and the meats and the this and the that, and we just have a big party. And the funny thing about Dr. Leibrecht is that he's German, so it's hard to see him kind of cut loose and have fun. But at those cultural parties, he enjoyed it so much. He was definitely able to have some fun.
He always he wanted to be close to the students.
Yes.
He hated bureaucracy. Well, it had to be done, so he made me in charge of the finance. So I was the treasurer, vice president of finance for many years, and as you know, my father had not only a university, he started a chain of hotels, language schools, real estate, and whatnot. But his heart was always with education, with the students. And also his financial interest. I mean, sometimes we really struggled to have an even balanced balance sheet. Sometimes it was a negative thing, and he would throw in his personal money, but he would never, ever use the university to just for his personal wealth, I would say. At the end, I mean, due to other things, he was kind of well off, but education was his heart, and he hated when sometimes I came, I had to discuss things with the budget, and he would listen to it, and he made some decisions. But that's why also the end of his years, when he was always well over 70, he died in 2007, he was 79, nearly 80. He was at the Florida campus, but he spent lots of time in London, always close to the students at the Haral. It's much better to be with young people than with old guys. Kept him young, I think, as well, also in thought. And I still meet. And during my political times, I was, my last 4 years, like a high commissioner, part of the German government in charge of the German-American relations. So I had to do a lot of speeches. I was at Northwestern and Harvard, and that twice same situation. Old guy, shaky, came and said, "Hey, by the way, is your father Walter Leibrecht? I met him 50 years ago." So they still remembered him. So I think that was for me a wonderful experience. And as you also, your own experiences, I hear similar stories quite often that he changed their life. But not only if you met him personally, but it's the Schiller spirit. And we talked over lunch that for many students, it's, they go here to Madrid, to the campus, or to London, and they kind of struggle through their studies and have some parties and so. But the real values they maybe discover once they have left the university, when they enter their world, whatever they do later, and learn how valuable those experiences were. You have suddenly buddies, friends all over the world. I personally, wherever I traveled, I was into foreign affairs. My brother Thomas, who was the campus director in Heidelberg, he would always give me a list. One part was all the relatives, my ancestors going back sometimes 500 years. Right. Like in the Ukraine, he said, if you're in that church, behind that there's the Vladimir and Olga, and these are your, whatever, if you search long enough, you're related to everybody. But he made that list. Plus, he was, because he was so well linked with alumni, he said, Harold, if you have a chance, call him or her and him, and he has this business and he is involved in that social project. And often enough, even our ambassador was always very impressed that in addition to all their programs, I had my little Schiller niche, and that was often the most interesting part of the whole trip.
That's wonderful. And I'm glad you brought up that he has been very cherished and honored in all circles. I remember when he passed away in 2007 in Dunedin, which is the area of Florida I'm from, which is where the Florida campus used to be. But the Tampa Bay Times honored him with a beautiful piece about his legacy and his vision for international education. So he's definitely well known in Florida and Dunedin as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, I mean, Germany was. It didn't. He didn't really care much, but I always thought he should have been a little more honored also in his own home country. But often enough, your own country doesn't really recognize what someone does for not only for Germany but for the world. But he got a lot of honors all over. So. He enjoyed. He would never accept like a medal or anything like that. That was not his thing. Yeah. He said, no, as long as I'm able to educate young people and I want to make them real cosmopolitans, be tolerant people. And the tolerance, I mean, he taught us, his own children. I mean, that's how I grew up. I remember when our vice president of our school was in a very early stage when AIDS came up. Died on AIDS. He was vice president also in Heidelberg. And then, the news was he has an infection of the lungs. So that was the typical story. And then he would gather me and my 4 siblings and said, we all know John, and he's part of the success of the university. Without him, I could have never, built up what we have. But he died on AIDS, and he told us, and when I was younger then, was long before I worked for Schiller, but he would and say, never ever judge someone of his race, of his sexual belief. You judge someone. He hated ignorant people. But he differentiated very much between being ignorant and uneducated, because he often said there are people that are not so happy. They're not on the sunny side of the street. They are uneducated, but they can still be, intelligent. But he often enough had to do, especially when you work on accreditation things with countries where they are, they have no vision and no idea. And then he said, ignorant people, that they drove him sometimes nuts.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Harold. It's clear Dr. Leibrecht's legacy continues to live on in Schiller International University and our community. As we look to the future, how do you see the university continuing to uphold his vision, Harold?
With Gedo and Dr. Rana and the whole team, it has a great future. It has, for the first time in years, a real chance to prosper, not only to what it used to be, but be much bigger. And I always thought, Schiller is into a much bigger idea as it physically is. And it could be the blueprint for a lot of educational system in other countries. I mean, as we heard, Schiller was represented, is represented over 120 countries, and many of them need also a private education and more help. And interesting enough, even when we sold Schiller to Investors Group after my father, he died in 2007, but he already kind of started this process. I always wanted to keep it somehow, but it was difficult because I have 4 siblings. They had other ideas. I think, but it needed also some financial infusion from outside, but it also needs people who follow this idea, who get bitten by this spirit. I always talk about the spirit of Schiller, which is so unseen in other educational school institutions. I mean, I've started a study abroad a provider with my wife long ago, and we have a foundation, and we are now one of the largest providers in the world for this. So we bring a lot of American students, but more on a short-term situation. And we started that more or less because after the sales of Schiller, we identified that these new owners then, they had no clue what really to do with this, and they concentrated on some core parts of the university, but they forgot about the origin we had. And we started off with having a lot of American students in the university. Have an American university in Europe with American students, but with a mix of students from all over the world. So both sides can benefit. And especially now when I see the developments in the United States politically, and I travel the States a lot, 4 or 5 times or 6 times a year, and I'm often shocked how openly people talk about, racism or political ignorance. Here I meet a lot of ignorance, and they have, young people often enough have no clue about the world, about Europe. Yes. I mean, if you want a peaceful world, if the world would consist of Schiller students, we would have a much more peaceful world. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Harold. It's been a privilege to hear about your father's incredible journey and lasting impact he's had on so many lives. I'm sure our audience feels as inspired as we all do. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, just keep on. I would like, if I would have a wish, maybe see one day a Schiller campus in London again. Okay. But there are still so many other destinations. But first of all, to have Schiller, and Schiller is back in the spirit. I wish you, the staff, the faculty, the administration, Dr. Rana, your whole team. I met your board. I mean, everyone is such a treasure for the school, and you have the right network. I see a very, very bright future for Schiller International University. I'm very happy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Harold, and thank you everyone who came here today. And we know that Dr. Leibrecht's vision and his work, together with all of us, will continue to create a brighter future and connect us all for more days to come. So thank you so much, everyone.
And next is Paul Isbell. Where are you, Paul? And Christina. We will finish with the tribute to Schiller, the poet, as it couldn't be other way, by our former and very dear Professor Paul Isbell and wonderful and talented Christina.